In the dazzling world of Hong Kong cinema, few figures were as beloved as Eric Tsang. He was the industry's jovial uncle, a celebrated comedian whose face was synonymous with laughter. But a forgotten interview with a troubled actress, its most shocking detail silenced by a censor's bleep, was about to resurface with explosive force. This is the story of how a single, uncensored video threatened to unravel a carefully crafted public image, expose a pattern of alleged predation, and challenge an entire industry's culture of silence. For more deep dives into stories the powerful tried to bury, subscribe below. The story began not with a bang, but with a carefully edited whisper. In 2013, the Hong Kong entertainment world, a universe of dazzling lights and closely guarded secrets, was presented with a chilling puzzle. A local magazine, Next Magazine, published an interview with Yammie Lam, an actress whose tragic story was already a well-known cautionary tale. In her heyday, she was a luminous beauty, a rising star with undeniable talent. But by 2013, her life had been marred by a car accident, financial ruin, and a public battle with mental health issues that the city's ruthless tabloids had chronicled with glee. Her struggles were often used as a lens through which to view her, painting her as an unreliable figure, a fallen idol whose words were to be taken with a grain of salt. This time, however, her words carried a weight that could not be easily dismissed. In the interview, conducted in a stark, unglamorous setting, Lam spoke in a low, halting voice. She recounted a story of profound trauma, a violation that had occurred decades earlier at the height of her fame. She claimed that two of the industry's big brothers, powerful men whose influence was legendary, had raped her. The first incident, she said, happened during a film production in Singapore. The second involved another titan of the industry. It was a bombshell accusation, a story that could shatter the carefully constructed facade of the entertainment empire. But the magazine, perhaps fearing legal repercussions or the wrath of the men involved, made a crucial decision. When Yammie Lam spoke the names of her alleged attackers, their identities were deliberately obscured, replaced by a jarring, empty bleep. The effect was immediate and intense. The censored interview created a vacuum that was instantly filled with speculation. Who were these two men? The term Big Brother in the Hong Kong industry denotes not just stardom, but immense power, the kind of influence that can make or break careers, open any door, and silence any critic. The entire city began to play a grim guessing game. Lists of potential names were drawn up in online forums and whispered in green rooms. Every powerful male figure from that era came under a cloud of suspicion. The censored names became a symbol of the industry's impenetrable wall of silence, a testament to the idea that some men were simply too powerful to be named, let alone held accountable. The story was a ghost, a haunting presence without a face. For years, it remained just that, a dark rumor, a piece of tragic celebrity lore that everyone knew but no one could prove. Yammie Lam's story was out there, but it was incomplete. Her truth held hostage by those bleeps. Then, 5 years later, in the cold beginning of January 2018, the ghost was given a face. The internet, a force far less controllable than a magazine's editorial board, delivered the missing pieces. A video clip began to circulate on Weibo, the massive Chinese social media platform, spreading from user to user with the speed of a digital wildfire. It was purported to be the original unedited footage from Yammie Lam's 2013 interview. The video quality was raw, free of the professional gloss of the published version. But the most significant difference was in the audio. There were no bleeps. The silence that had protected the powerful for half a decade was finally broken. As the interviewer's voice gently prompted her, Yammie Lam's voice, fragile but clear, named her alleged attackers. The first was Alan Tang, a celebrated actor and producer known for his suave, heroic roles. He was a respected figure, an industry elder who had passed away in 2011. His death meant he could never answer the charge, leaving the accusation to hang in the air, forever unresolved. The second name, however, belonged to a man who was very much alive, a figure who was not just a star, but an institution. It was a name synonymous with Hong Kong entertainment itself, Eric Tsang. The revelation was a collective shock. Eric Tsang was not some distant, brooding tycoon. He was a beloved public figure, the short, cheerful comedian and master of ceremonies, who had been a constant presence on television screens for generations. His face was associated with laughter, with game shows, with charity events, and with the annual Miss Hong Kong pageant. He was the industry's funny uncle, a jovial and seemingly harmless personality. To hear his name connected to such a brutal act of violence was a deeply unsettling cognitive dissonance. The accusation didn't just target a man, it targeted a cherished public persona, an image that had been carefully cultivated over decades of success. The uncensored video recontextualized everything. The whispers had become a roar. The puzzle was solved, but the picture it revealed was far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The initial allegation, once a censored and speculative story, had now fully arrived, complete with names, and the Hong Kong entertainment industry would never be the same. The digital dam had broken, and the torrent of information was unstoppable. In the hours and days following the release of the uncensored video, the name Eric Tsang was no longer just associated with comedy. It was attached to a dark and disturbing accusation that echoed across the global Chinese-speaking community. Social media platforms became virtual courthouses, where millions of people dissected the grainy footage, debated Yammie Lam's credibility, and grappled with the implications. For many, it felt like a moment of reckoning, a crack in the gleaming surface of an industry long rumored to harbor predators among its most powerful players. Yet, amidst the fury, a predictable counter-narrative began to form. Supporters of Tsang and industry apologists pointed to Lam's history of mental health struggles, subtly and sometimes overtly suggesting that her account was the product of a troubled mind, an unreliable memory distorted by years of personal tragedy. The story was threatening to become a classic he said, she said scenario, with one side being a beloved, powerful icon, and the other a fragile, marginalized woman. It was a deeply uneven fight. Just as this narrative of doubt began to solidify, a new voice emerged, one that could not be so easily dismissed. This voice belonged to Grace Han, a name that carried its own formidable weight in the world of Asian entertainment and fashion. Han was not an actress or a fleeting celebrity. She was a power broker, the former head of the Asia-Pacific region for Ford Models, one of the most prestigious modeling agencies in the world. She was a woman who had navigated the highest echelons of the industry, who knew its players, and who understood its hidden mechanics. When she spoke, it was not as a victim of circumstance, but as an insider who had seen firsthand what happened behind the velvet rope. Han stepped into the raging debate with a series of public statements on her social media accounts, and her words acted as a powerful accelerant. Her first act was to stand firmly with Yammie Lam. She declared that she believed Lam's account, offering a crucial piece of corroboration that instantly bolstered Lam's credibility. Han stated that the stories about Eric Tsang were not new to her, that his reputation for misconduct was more than just a rumor among those in the know. This alone was a significant blow to Tsang's defense. It transformed the narrative from a single isolated accusation into a potential pattern of behavior vouched for by a respected professional. But Grace Han was not finished. She did not just come to support an old claim. She came armed with her own. She unleashed a story that was far more detailed and, in many ways, more shocking than Lam's original account. Han recounted an incident she claimed to have witnessed herself, a story that painted a picture of calculated predation. She alleged that on one occasion, Eric Tsang and a group of other male Hong Kong celebrities had invited a group of young models from her agency to a private room at a KTV, a popular type of karaoke bar. It was a common enough social event in the industry, an opportunity for aspiring talents to network with established stars. But according to Han, this night took a sinister turn. She claimed that the men secretly drugged the models' drinks. When the young women became disoriented and incapacitated, they were led away and assaulted. Han described her horror and powerlessness, and her subsequent efforts to help the traumatized models, one of whom she had to personally escort from the situation. This new allegation was a strategic game changer. It was not a decades-old memory, but a more recent event. It did not involve just one alleged victim, but several. It did not name just one alleged predator, but implicated a group of powerful men acting in concert. And it came from a source whose professional reputation was built on protecting and managing the careers of young women. Han's story provided a chilling methodology, a potential blueprint for how such abuses of power could be carried out under the guise of industry socializing. She spoke of Tsang not as a rogue actor, but as a figure who allegedly engaged in this behavior more than once. Her testimony was a direct challenge to the entire culture of silence. She was not just accusing a man, she was accusing a system that enabled him, a system where the powerful could operate with impunity, preying on the ambitious and the vulnerable. The scandal had now escalated dramatically. It was no longer confined to the tragic story of Yammie Lam. Grace Han had opened a second front, bringing fresh and explosive charges that were impossible to ignore, forcing the cheerful comedian out of the shadows and demanding that he answer not just for the past, but for the present as well. The storm of allegations had reached a fever pitch, creating a vortex of public outrage and speculation that centered on one man. For days, Tsang remained silent. The silence itself was a statement, a void that allowed the accusations from Yammie Lam and Grace Han to echo and amplify without rebuttal. In the hyper-connected world of modern celebrity, this absence was unsustainable. The pressure was immense, not just from the public, but likely from within the industry itself, an institution that abhors a scandal it cannot control. The cheerful comedian, the master of ceremonies, the ubiquitous face of Hong Kong entertainment, was cornered. He had to speak. The announcement, when it came, was formal and deliberate. A press conference would be held. It was a classic move from the crisis management playbook, an attempt to seize control of the narrative, to replace the chaotic swirl of online rumor with a single authoritative statement delivered directly to the world's media. The day of the press conference was thick with anticipation. The designated room was a cauldron of nervous energy, packed wall to wall with journalists, photographers, and camera crews. Flashes strobed relentlessly, capturing every empty chair before the main players arrived, as if to document the tension in the air itself. This was not a movie premiere or a celebratory event. It was a battle for a man's reputation, and everyone present knew the stakes were impossibly high. When Tsang finally entered, he was not the jovial figure audiences knew. His face was grim, set in a hard line of defiance. He walked with a determined stride, flanked on one side by his lawyer and on the other by his son, the acclaimed film director Tsang. The presence of his son was a powerful, silent message of familial support, a visual declaration of solidarity aimed squarely at the hearts of a public that values filial piety. They took their seats behind a long table, facing the sea of cameras like men preparing for a siege. When Tsang leaned into the microphone to speak, the room fell silent. His voice, usually animated and high-pitched with laughter, was low and steady, laced with an unmistakable tone of anger. He began by addressing the core accusation, the one that had started the firestorm. He declared the uncensored video of Yammie Lam to be a complete fabrication. He insisted that the clip had been doctored, maliciously edited to insert his name where it did not belong. He dismissed it as fake news, a calculated and cruel attempt to destroy him. He spoke of the respect he had for women and the film industry, painting himself as a dedicated professional whose entire career was now under attack by a lie. His denial was absolute and unequivocal. There was no room for misinterpretation, no hint of apology or compromise. He was, he stated, completely innocent of the decades-old charge. Then, he turned his attention to his second accuser, Grace Han. The shift in his tone was palpable. If his denial regarding Yammie Lam was one of weary frustration, his response to Han was one of raw indignation. He categorically rejected all her claims of misconduct, including the horrific story of the drugged models at the karaoke bar. He portrayed her allegations as baseless slander, malicious falsehoods designed to inflict maximum damage on his character. He declared that these were lies that he could not and would not tolerate. And then came the counterattack, with his lawyer sitting beside him as a symbol of the institutional power he was about to wield. Tsang announced that he was taking legal action. He had already initiated proceedings in the Hong Kong High Court, filing a defamation lawsuit against Grace Han for her damaging statements. This was the press conference's true purpose. It was not just a denial, it was a declaration of war. By suing his accuser, Tsang was fundamentally changing the dynamics of the conflict. He was moving the fight from the court of public opinion, where emotions and beliefs held sway, to a court of law, where evidence, procedure, and immense financial resources would determine the outcome. It was a bold and aggressive strategy, a clear message to Han and anyone else who might consider speaking out. Accuse me, and I will use the full force of the legal system to silence you. The lawsuit was both a shield to protect his name and a sword aimed directly at his most credible critic. He was daring her to prove her claims under the intense scrutiny of a legal battle, a prospect that can be daunting and financially ruinous for any individual, no matter how successful. The immediate aftermath of the press conference was a fractured landscape of belief and disbelief. For his supporters and many in the industry, the strong denial and legal action were proof of his innocence. They saw a man righteously defending his honor against a vicious, unsubstantiated smear campaign. They applauded his strength and his willingness to fight back. Online, his fans rallied, echoing his claims that the video was fake and that the allegations were part of a conspiracy. But for many others, the performance rang hollow. They saw not an innocent man, but a powerful one using a familiar script. The aggressive denial, the attack on the accuser's credibility, and the immediate resort to legal intimidation felt like a textbook tactic to silence victims. They questioned why a man with nothing to hide would need to shut down the conversation so forcefully rather than welcome a full investigation. The scandal was now entrenched in a state of open conflict. The lines had been drawn. On one side stood Tsang, with his fame, his wealth, his legal team, and his public declaration of innocence. On the other stood Grace Han, facing a daunting and expensive legal battle to defend her words, and the haunting memory of Yammie Lam, whose original accusation had been posthumously caught in the crossfire. Tragically, Yammie Lam herself passed away later that same year, in November 2018. She would never see any resolution, legal or otherwise. Her story, which had begun as a censored whisper and erupted into a global roar, was left without its central voice. Tsang's press conference had successfully shifted the narrative from a moral reckoning to a legal dispute, but it failed to extinguish the fire. It left the public with an unresolved and deeply unsettling impasse, a testament to the enduring power of celebrity and the immense difficulty of finding the truth when one voice can afford to shout so much louder than the others. In the end, the scandal remains a fractured portrait of denial versus accusation, frozen by a defamation lawsuit and the tragic death of the original accuser, Yammie Lam. Tsang's career endured, his forceful rebuttal and legal power forming a shield the allegations could not definitively pierce. The truth, whatever it may be, is locked in a stalemate of celebrity, silence, and tragedy, leaving the public to forever wonder what really happens when the cameras stop rolling. To explore more cases where truth and power collide, hit that subscribe button and join the conversation.